We'll do a review on the Likutei Sichos in Chelik Chof Hey. This is the second Sicha of Parshas Vayigash. It's a Sicha which is based on Sichos and a Maimer, and the discussion over here is the connection between the Achdus between Yehuda and Yosef. In the Parshas Vayigash Elov Yehuda, that Yehuda comes to Yosef, and the Haftorah discusses how in the future also Yosef and Yehuda will be combined with the prophecy that each one was written on a wood on its own, and you bring them together, and the Hoyula Chodim. The Rebbe discusses how unity takes place. The Rebbe talks about there's two ways to unite, but that's not, each of the ways are not fully uniting, and uniting comes through Torah. The Rebbe explains the Zohar uh, about this, explains also Los and Lavai, whole Arechas Habir. We'll go step by step. We're learning Lilu Nishmas, Harav Levi Yitzchok, and Rav Chaim Tzvi, Tehei Nishmos Yitzrura B'Tzrura Chaim. And also Lilu Nishmosam of the dear Shluchim who were unfortunately murdered by this terrorist Yimach Shemam V'Zichram on the first night of Hanukkah, as they were celebrating with 2,000 people of the Australian community in Sydney. May Hashem avenge their blood. We'll learn it also Leilu Nishmasam. We'll go step by step. Vayigash Beis. Aleph. Es ist Yedua, as the Haftorah seinen jedere Minyone shel Parsha. First, the Rebbe wants to point to the Haftorah of this week's Parsha to talk about the idea of unity. So the Haftorah are always chosen, they have the same idea, the topic of the Parsha. And in our case, the Sichos from Haftorah's Parsha Senu, the connection between the Haftorah of our Parsha, which is the Parshas of Vayigash, so the Seder is Bepashtus, is very obvious, very simply, the connection is there. Der Teuchen, the content, or the beginning of this Parsha Vayigash, is Kishmo, is as the name, it's called Vayigash. The Hagosha from Yehuda to Yosef. That's Yehuda coming close to Yosef, speaking up to Yosef when Yosef held the brothers back. So Yehuda went over to Yosef to plead the case. But this is nit nor a Hagosha als Yechidim bifnei atzmoi. It's not just Yehuda as an individual uh, by themselves. That we're talking about an encounter between two individuals, Yehuda and Yosef. No. Nor is mevuin in Zohar, but as articulated, explained in the Zohar, as of Hagoshas Yehuda Yosef state, that with regards to this encounter when Yehuda is coming to Yosef, it's written in the verse Ki hine hamelochim noyadu yochad. The kings have been in Tehillim Memches, that the kings have come together, have met. So we're not talking to them as individual. We're talking about the kings, the Melochim, do Yehuda v'Yosef. That is Yehuda and Yosef. These are kings. Begin the Tarvayu Melochim, because they're both kings. So it's a meeting between kings as representatives of their kingdom, which is the rest of the Yid. Under Teuchef von der Hadgosha, and the Teuchef, and what is this bringing together? What is the contents? What's the idea of this getting together? Is tikrofto the alma ba'alma. That is a closeness, bringing together the two worlds, one world with the other worlds. Lischado do bedo, to unite one with the other. Lemehevi kulachad, to become all one. Vischadi udo bedo, to become one and to connect one with the other. So this is a connection between kings to unite the kings together. That's Vayigash of Yehuda. Und das ist der Teuchen von der Hafteure. So now that we're teaching Vayigash of Yehuda, according to the Zohar, there were worlds coming together. This is, and the different kings is the content of Yehuda and Yosef is the content of the Haftarah. How in the future to come, that Zayin der Ichud from Malchus Yehuda, Malchus Yosef, there will be the union and uniting the government of Yehuda and the government of Yosef, the kings of Yehuda and the kings of Yosef. So the Eibishter says in the Haftarah, in Yecheskel, it says that Kachlcha, the Eibishter says to Yecheskel Hanavi that Kachlcha eitz echad, take one wood, ukseva lovely Yehuda, and write on it Yehuda, etc., and all the rest of those and the following, those go with Yehuda. And then take eitz echad, another wood, one wood, ukseva lovely Yosef, and write for Yosef and those who go with Yosef going there. Ukrab Oisav, you bring these two woods together. Goimer Bahoyu Lachodim Biyodecha. There will be one in your hand. And what's the meaning of this this act that the Eibusher is telling Yecheskel to do? Koyomer Hashem Goimer. So says Hashem, etc. Sisi Oisam Legoy Echad. I will make him to one nation. Instead of being Yosef and Yehuda, a separate nation, I'll make them to one nation. Umelech echad lekulam goimer, and there will be one king for all, no different separate kings. V'lo yiyu oid lishnei goyim. It's all in Yecheskel, the prophecy, the meaning of this eitz echad. They will no longer be two nations. V'lo yechotzu oid lishtei mamlochas oid, and they will no longer split into two separate kingdoms. It'll be one kingdom. This is the becoming one. But the Rebbe asks, becoming one basically means that we're not going to have Yosef anymore. What does it mean becoming one? One, that Yehuda is going to be King Mashiach, and Yosef is going to be in his battle. So is that really what unity is about? That there shall be just Yehuda without Yosef there. Mendarfa bertoisus biur. We need additional explanation. Vazei zokmen as lachodim, that they become like one. Vasisem le'etz echad v'hoyu echad biyodi, and I will make these two separate woods to one wood, and there will be one in my hand. So there's no more two pieces of wood. The Eibishter makes them one wood. Vos inim shalistos. What is the parable? What does it mean that one would? As the pasuk says, the meaning of it is there'll be one nation. Be one king. So since vibald as the melech echad v'zayin fun shevet Yehuda, since this one king, who is going to be the king? It's going to be from the tribe Yehuda. Und the olam davke. And the emphasis, it's going to be specifically, it's going to be forever. It's not going to be maybe a little bit Yehuda, maybe a little bit Yosef. No, it's going to be, La'olam is going to be from the Shevet Yehuda. V'yadis mamshich. As the prophecy continues in Yecheskel, V'avdi David, melech aleihem, v'rei echad yilu kulam, that my servant David is the king over them, and one shepherd Yilukulam will be for everybody. The David Avdi Nosilam Vayla, and the pasuk clearly says, my servant David will be their leader forever. Is doch das l'chayre nit ke shleimus de ke achdus. Therefore, there seems to be not a complete unity over here. What kind of unity is? Vorum Malchus Yosef Ephraim, because the government of Yosef, which was from the tribe of Ephraim, Yerovam ben Nevat, there was the descendants of Yosef from Ephraim, was is given bis damult Malchus Farzich, which until that time was a government for itself at Bottlever. And it's gonna cease, and forever is Faram Demel Blois that Ein Eitz Shel Yehuda, and forever there only remains the one wood of Yehuda. There's no more Binyamin, no more Yosef. Okay, so how is that considered to be true unity when it's going to cease the tribe of Ephraim, the tribe of Yosef, the Malchus Yosef? So now the Rebbe is going to reject the idea. Maybe it's going to be Yehuda. Maybe there's going to be some position for Ephraim too, for Yosef. Maybe there's going to be something for them. And the Rebbe, although we find some in the Gemara, we find that sort of a compromise. Gemara says Caesar, a half a Caesar. But as far as Ephraim goes, it's very clear there will no longer be anything. There's no position. Everything is Yehuda, is King Mashiach. It would seem that maybe we can say as also in the future to come, there'll be two steps and two levels in kingdom. Similar to what the Gemara says, the Gabi David un Mashiach. So the Gemara asks a question where he's gonna. Is there going to be a new David? It's the old David. The Gemara brings different psukim over there, different opinions. And he wanted to answer, yeah, that's from within the David, the dynasty of David, whether it's going to be Okim or Hakim, was it from before? The Gemara says it's both true, possibly, because Caesar upalgi Caesar. You can have a full Caesar and a half a Caesar. So it's within its shaykhs to say, so maybe there is a position for over here too for Yosef. Similar is going to be for the government, the government of Yosef, that there is a role for Yosef as well. It doesn't mean it's going to cease. But besides the fact that even if that was the case, if we would say that, as Demult is thus nitkin achdus bishleimuso. This would need be a true, complete unity. Warum Yehuda is le'olam hecher on abgetelt von Yosef, because Yehuda will always be higher and distinguished of Yosef. He is the king. But Bechlal, besides that, even if that was the case, but the Rebbe says by Yosef we can't say that, like the Gemara says with regards to Keser, which is from the tribe of Yehuda. The Malchus from Aseres HaShvatim, the governance of the 10 tribes. Warum says Meforish, Bekama Mekoimes, because it's specifically, very clearly in many places, as Le'osid Lovev et Malchus Zayin, Blois from Melech HaMashiach, that in the future to come, the government is going to be only King Mashiach. Ukimuvan from Noshun Haftorah Gufa, as it's understood, the language in the Haftorah, in the prophecy, it says, Umelech Echad Yiyeh L'Kulam, will be just one king for all of them. V'Raya Echad Yiyeh L'Kulam, there will be just one shepherd for all of them, and not participation from Yosef in any shape or form. We have an idea of Mashiach ben Yosef. That's before, not once the government of the started. Und das, was steht The Medrash Razal, the fact that it's written in the Medrashim of our sages, his blessed memory, as that Zayin Mashiach ben Yosef, there is going to be a Mashiach comes from Yosef, from the tribe of Yosef. Is das nicht in demselben Zman zusammen mit Mashiach ben David? That's not talking about during the same period in which there's going to be Mashiach ben David. Not in a freer dikun Zman, but in a earlier time. Eider as werd bepoil Malchus the Mashiach ben David before it actually turns into the garment of Mashiach ben David, there will be Mashiach ben Yosef. But once there is the period of Mashiach ben David, there's no more Yosef. So no more Mashiach ben Yosef. So basically, Yosef is going to cease to exist as a representation in the future forever. No longer Yosef. How could we call that unity when it's really a cessation of Yosef, that he is no longer serving in any capacity? So how do we call it unity? So that's the question the Rebbe presents over here. And the Rebbe brings out from a Zohar, which also discusses a level of unity. Uh, and the Rebbe says from that Zohar, we can understand what real unity is after studying that Zohar. So, based, but when those verstehen behagdim, so we'll understand it by first introducing that was the Zohar is Masbir Kanal. Before the Zohar explains, we brought down before that Yosef and Yehuda, Vayigash Elov Yehuda, that's the worlds coming together. So we quoted from the Zohar to make them a union between Yosef and Yehuda. Is the Zohar is Maldi with the Teuchen von Agosha Yehuda le Yosef. Before the Zohar brings down that the Yehuda, when Vayigash Elov Yehuda to Yosef is quote, Tikreifta, the Alma Ba'alma Lemaheve Kulachad. These are the bringing together the two worlds, one world with the other, Yosef and Yehuda, to become one. Ver dor der zelt asipur. So in the Zohar, it relates a story. And that's what it relates over there. It says, Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Yehuda have a Yosef Leilechad. So Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Yehuda were sitting one particular night, and they were studying Torah, Geharvet and Torah. They were putting effort in studying Torah. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yitzchak says to Rabbi Yehuda, Hotaninon, we learned that the Kadbro Kochabrichu Oma, that when the Eibishter created the world, Avad Alma Tato, Kikavna the Alma Ilah. So he made the lower world similar to the upper worlds. He created two worlds, a lower and an upper, and he made the Alma Tato similar to the Alma Ilah. V'kula da l'kabel da. And everything in this world corresponds to this world. Everything in the lower world corresponds to the upper world, and the upper world to the lower world. V'ihu yikore le'ela v'tata, and that is his yikor, his precious above and below in these both worlds. This is the yikor of Hashem. This is what Rabbi Yitzchak says to Rabbi Yehuda. Omar Rabbi Yehuda, says Rabbi Yehuda, Hachi Havi Vadi. It's true. There's the two worlds. But Ubra Adam al Kula. He created, on top of everything, he created a man. Hado Diksiv. As the Pasuk says, Anoichi Osisi Eretz, I made the land. The Adam Aleha Barasi. And I created man on the earth. It says the Ihu Kiyuma de Alma. He sustains the world Lemehavikula Bishlimuchad, to make them all complete union, so that the upper and the lower worlds will be all together. Man combines and makes the sustains the world and brings together the upper and the lower world. That's his Odom Barleho Barasi, says Rabbi Yehuda. So the Rebbe brings down that this Zohar is quoted in the notes of the Rebbe's father on the Zohar, but he explains some of it. The Rebbe is going to explain how all this is explains this Vayigash of Yehuda, that the Rebbe asked that level of union, but the Rebbe says that his father, because of the limitations being when he was writing this spear, he left the rest for the Rebbe, for him, to continue explaining this. The Tate in Zayin Ha'ores Eifen Zoyar, my father, the father of Levi Yitzchok, in his notes on the Zohar, is Mevayer explains Kedarkai, as it is usual way in Oisios from Kabbalah. He explains it in the words of Kabbalah, the Sichos, for the members to the Balei HaMaimer, the connection of these saying to the authors of these saying. As mitzad b'chinas Rabbi Yitzchok Gvura, that from the level of Rabbi Yitzchok, which was one of the authors, is Yitzchok Gvura, is Alma Tatoa Blois Kigabna the Alma Ilo. He says that the lower world is only similar Kigabna to the Alma upper world. Says Do Adinyan Bei Nehem. There is a comparison, there is a similarity between the upper world and the lower world. Aber sie bleiben zwei besondere Welten, but yet they remain two separate worlds. Rabbi Yehuda, but when Rabbi Yehuda responds to the level of Rabbi Yitzchak Gvura, which is separation, which is chesed, to t'oif, he comes up with the idea as the shaykhs from Alma Tato and Alma Ilo, that how is the relationship, the connection between the upper world and the lower world and the upper world? So sei nicht nur in dem, was sie seinen kagavno masimim zelozeh, should not just be in the level similar, kigavno, similar to the upper and above, and they fit one another, the upper and the lower levels fit, nor in an eifun von lemheve kula b'shlimuchat, in a way that they should all be one whole thing. An achdus b'shlemus v'shazei, a total unity amongst the upper and the lower world. So while Rebbe brings down his father, brings down the Zohar and the story, explains the names and the connection, Kabbalah, but he doesn't explain how this sheds light on the Zohar, on our Parsha. The Tat is aber nicht mevayer, the Shaykhs von dem Inyan zum Teuchen HaSedra. He doesn't explain, he doesn't articulate the connection from this idea to the content of the Seder. He relied, we get come upon him, spoken many times, as the simple matters we will be able to catch on ourselves. The Rebbe is talking about the Rebbe catching on. The Rebbe also references the Biur HaZohar for the Samach Tzedek, but in this case, we'll see the Rebbe continues to articulate and to bring out how the Zohar sheds light on the Parsha. The similar in our case, the Shaykhs from Sipur HaAmur zum Teuchen HaSedre, the connection of the story of above to the content of the Sedre is move on from Pashtus Hemshech HaInyan and Zohar dort. So that's understood from the flow of the idea in the Zohar, which talks about Vayigash of Yehuda, the connection. Noch dem Sipur in the Zohar, because after the story of the Zohar, he brings down Masbir Kinal, he explains, as we said before, wie der Teuchon von Agoshas Yehuda LeYosef is that the content, what does it mean that Yehuda came close to Yosef, is der Kiru von Alma Ba'alma, that's bringing worlds together, to make it all one. Al derech Rabbi Yehuda sagt, similar to what Rabbi Yehuda says, that make them all together as Alma Tato and Alma Love and Kula B'Shlem Echad, that the upper world, lower world, and the upper world become one union altogether. So that's the connection between this story simply and the Zohar. So since the Zohar is similar to the Parsha, talks about the level of unity, so perhaps we can actually learn out from this Parsha something about the level of unity. And the Rebbe is going to say in the story, that starts off by telling us that they were sitting and studying Torah. Why is that important to tell us that they were sitting and studying Torah if they just started to tell us that Rabbi Yitzchak said so and so? That is Torah. Why does he have to emphasize? The emphasis on Torah is because through Torah, you get the real level of unity, what they were discussing over there. Based on this, we can say, Ados was the Zohar is Magdim them Sipur Hanal. The fact that the Zohar introduces this above story is nit blois of bringen an inyan. It's not just to bring an idea in dem inyan hakiru von zwei besondere Welten, to bring an idea about bringing close two separate worlds, and in this case, bringing Yosef and Yehuda, that bringing Alma Elon, Alma Tato. Nor weil der Teuchen von dem Achdus zwischen Alma Tato and Alma Elon, but the reason is because the content, that union between the lower and upper world, was Vertnis Bayer in dem Sipur Hanal, which is explained in the story, is Negeya to the Rabbanah von Agoshas Yehuda LeYosef. That's important to the understanding of Yehuda coming to Yosef. So we bring this down story that will tell us what real union is. So that will explain to us the union of the Parsha. Is Negeya, that is Negeya to the Rabbanah von Agoshas Yehuda LeYosef, to understanding that Yehuda coming to Yosef, which is to Krafta the Alma Ba'alma, the bringing together the worlds, the two worlds, one world and the other world. So that's the reason why we bring this down, because from that level discussion of the union, we'll also understand the parsha of Yosef coming to Yehuda to coming to Yosef. Vayigash. Und damit is euch move on. And with this, we also understand was der Zohar is Magdim Besipur Hanal. The Zohar introduces in the above story as Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Yehuda have Yosve Leilachad V'lo Aon Be'oraisa. They were sitting there one day and they Geharevet, and they were working hard in Torah. The L'chayra is Tzarich Biur. L'chayra, we need explanation. Der Fun was gesagt Torah. The fact that they were speaking Torah is verstandig memela. So we already all know by itself as them gelernt Torah. They were studying Torah because they were teaching Torah, that they were learning Torah. Was is der Zogen al Sagdoma to the Torah Sanal? Why is it that they were saying as an introduction to the two teaching, as is given a matzav fun laon beiraitze, that the situation was they were studying the Torah? I mean, that's self-evident. Why does it specify that they were studying in Torah? Nor, but there's a reason for that. Weil in der Achdus von Alma Tato mit Alma Lo. How can you actually bring these worlds together? Is through law and is through Torah. Torah is midas emes. The Achdus von Alma Tato mit Alma Lo in an oifen. How do you bring together the lower and upper worlds in a way for lemehave kula b'shlimu chuda, so they all together should be wholesome? Is do a spezieller chidush was is nito in andere farim shel sholom v'achdus. There is a novelty, especially, which does not exist in other areas of peace and unity. Was kidei zu öfton dem öfon in sholem v'achdus. In order to accomplish, to make up this way of peace and unity, in order to really achieve the level of shlimu chad, that being a complete one, fordert sich der Hakdama von Laon be'eraisa. That requires the introduction to study in Torah, as is Aleph, two things, not just Torah, but Harven in Torah. As is Aleph verbunden mit Torah, it is connected to Torah, and based in an Eufen. And how do we learn Torah? Fulon, Yigia b'Torah, effort, struggling to reach and understand the Torah. Kedil Kamon Sivhei, as we later Sivhei. Und der Eufen Ha'agdus, and this type of unity that comes from struggling in Torah, which is the Midas Emes, Git Euch Hezber, and that also provides explanation in der Achdus Miyuchedes, was wird aufgetan, in that special union which is accomplished Ben Yosef Yehuda, Ben Yosef Yehuda. So once we see and understand that union that takes place through Torah and the effort in Torah, in that union of Al Melah, and Tata explains to us also, and that union which is accomplished between Yosef and Yehuda, as is Achidu Do Bido, that they became united one with the other, and as a verum betachlis hayichud b'shlimu, that they become totally yichud, in complete yichud, complete union in a evna shlemu. And that's why this piece of Zohar will shed light also on the parsha, on that level of yichud. Now, the Rebbe will explain that there's two normally discussed ways to connect the different worlds. Uh, One through a overpowering from above, but that doesn't really unite it in its details. And then the other way is to connect it in its details, but that really means that you have to, the upper loses its level and the lower raises its level, and you're still not really connecting at their level. So the real connection needs something that to combine both, as the Rebbe will explain. Dalet. The beer in them. The explanation is this: the Yichud von zwei Welten, to unite two worlds, can sein bechlol. So generally speaking, it can take place durch zwei Efanim in two ways. Aleph, durch an Eir Elyon Hameir Aleim. It's by having a superior light that shines on them, was is Hecher from beide Welten, which is higher than both of these worlds that you're trying to combine, to unite, in Yonim Shonim, which are different, says the two worlds are different, and something higher than these two differences that brings about the union, as the Rebbe will explain. And Beis durch Hamemutza zwischen the zwei Inyonim, or through an intermediary between these two aspects, the two things you're trying to combine. The difference between these two ways, b'shas zwei Inyonim werden is battle, when two separate matters become subjugated because there is a force, an oir, a light that comes from above, which is higher than both of them, und sie werden es achet zwischen sich, and they become united between themselves because of this higher level, which is higher than both. For example, al derech wie zwei sorim was werden es battle b'fnei hamelech. Similar to you have two officers who each one has their own agenda, or they're in charge of opposite areas of the kingdom, and yet they both become subjugated in the presence of the king, b'fnei hamelech, in front of the king. Is his achdus? So then that union that they get together, nit mitzad zeir mitzias protis, it's not that they're individual entity of what they stand for or what they are supposed to be, that there's a union over there. That doesn't change. Not al derech maimer hazal. But this can be understood similar to the saying of our sages of blessed memory, al aposik, on the verse Hamshel v'fachad imoy oisa shalom b'mreimah. Dominance in Posuk Yiniv, that dominance and fear is together with him, so he makes peace in the above, which is Michoel Sar Shalmaim, which means that Michoel, who is in charge, the officer of water, Gabriel Sar Shel Eish, he is the officer in charge of fire. They don't extinguish one another. So how does that union through the imposing this higher level, the Hamshel Mafachad Imay, when Hashem uh, is in the presence of these Sorim, so they don't oppose each other, and there's unity, there's a Shalom, but does kum mitzad dem bos HaKadosh Baruch Hu oiseh Shalom b'mreimo. That comes because Hashem makes the peace in those who are exalted ones, the angels, mitzad the ha'orah rabba from the Meibershim, that because there is a great shine from Hashem, umitzad them, and because of that great force, that great light, is the sar shel mayim and the sar shel eish. So therefore, the officer who is of water and the officer who is of fire, nit margish their mitzias, so they do not feel their entity, so they lose their their force of who they are, because they're in the presence, these tremendous oil from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So they lose their opposition to each other also. So the fact that they lose their self and they don't feel themselves, so they no longer are opponents, and they're no longer opposite one of another. Aber in dem Eifen is the Achdus nicht kein Achdus Bishleimus. But in this way, that union is not a complete union. Warum? That Eish and the Mayim Shabahem werden nicht achet zwischen sich. It's not that the fire and the water, which is part of the Sar, Shalesh and Sar Shalesh, are become united. But rather, the fire and water, from their aspect, they remain in their entity. This one is water and this one is fire, and that remains. The only thing is they're not functioning in that because of the great shine. And the fact that they get together, that union comes only mitzad bitla hergish shekol echad v'echad. That comes because of the negation and non-feeling of each one and one. When they feel the king, they don't feel themselves. They don't feel their aspect. They don't feel themselves as an independent matter. That's one way. The zweite Reufen is, the second way is, B'shas the Achdus, when that union kommt, uh, it comes through an intermediary, zwischen zwei Inyonim, between two matters, and you have an intermediary combining them. Was the Achdus is, that union, the intermediary, how does he unite? Is mitzad them was der memutza hot hashaychus, that intermediary has a connection, unis me'ein from the Beidin Yonim, and he is similar, and he has somewhat of both him Yonim. Und der Mitte is a memutza was, and that's why, because he has a little bit from the upper and a little bit of the lower, he becomes the intermediate, the connecting piece. He's the memutza was is mechaber ein inyan. He can connect one idea hecheren mit dem zweiten niedrigen with the lower one, with the other one. Und in them oifen. So in this case, is the achdus mitzad inyan haprot v'yad inyan. The union comes because of its personal of each matter, the personal of the upper, what it stands for, and the lower. Aber euch die Achdus, but at the end of the day, that union is nicht beöffnen. It's not in a way as beide mitziusum k'moshe heim werden ischaber, that both entities, as they are, become united. They need that memutza, the lower of the upper and the upper of the lower, and that intermediate connects them, but they themselves are not connected. Warum der Chibur is nicht von jedem Inyan wie is bifnei atzmai. That connection is not how every item by itself nor blois, only in a way as they become close to each other. That alien state by shel yirida, the upper one is in the way of a descent, und der tachten by shel aliyah, and the lower one in a way of elevation. That's how they can come close. By way of example, so we take, for example, the mashal of how we connect the intellect and the emotions that come from the intellect. Although the emotions are created from the intellect, when you have an idea and realization and reflection on a certain matter, that then you begin to love it or to fear it. But intellect and emotions are two separate worlds. They are, to the extent that they are opposite worlds, not just different. Seichel is in Yonah Kriris Visyashu. Seichel idea is it's cold, settled. Umidus is in Yonam Chamimus Vispilus. The Midus are heated up and excitement. Is that Eifon Vimidus Verneled min Haseichel al Yidei Memutza? So how is the way that the emotions, which is something totally different than how are they born out of, how are they created from the intellect? They come through an intermediate. There is the level within the intellect, there's a level of the emotion within the intellect. Then there is a connection and a union between the intellect and the midas. Der Chibur is aber nicht, but this connection, however, nicht in der Metzias for Seichel Atzmei. It's not the entity of Seichel Atzmei. Seichel remains cold, remains settled, and midas are hot and excitement. Und euch nicht in Metzias Midas Atzmei. It's also not the entity of midas himself, nor in that darge, but where do they become united at a step? Was wird nicht nechlav shenismat inyan hasechel, in where it's weakened and diminished. Seichel is diminished. That's the midas of seichel. Und na darge wo the mitzias from midas state bechalishu bebitl, and in a level where the entity of the emotion is weak and subjugated. Das heißt, which means in the Mechibur von zwei Inyonim, when you connect two aspects, ubifrat, bein elyon v'tachta, especially between one, something higher and something lower, is nitshayich ken emes chibur. It doesn't really fit to have a true connection. Because in either of these two ways, if it comes from a superior, supreme light, was poiled and bittel from Beidin Yonim, which impacts the subjugation of both matters, is done der Sholem v'Achdus, not in them klal. So then that peace and union is only in the generally, but not in the details. And only in the common denominator amongst these two things is the peace impacted from above. But the perspective that individualized, they still matters, they remain separate. Und wenn der Chibur is al dem Memutza, was is mechaber in Yone HaProtis shel kol echad. But when there is a connection through each individual's matter, is just need the madrege protis k'mashehi, then it's not at the real level of that specific madrege. Nor der elyon vert ois elyon. The upper one is no longer above. Und der Tachten is nicht die Metzius von Tachten. The bottom one is not the entity of the Tachten. So, since from above it's just this battle, the Metzius from the above, but as their entities, they're still opposing each other. And if it comes through a Memutza, that's a deterioration of the higher level and an elevation of the lower level. But the upper and lower levels themselves are not connected. Anachdus amitis, in order for it to be a true union, as the madrege protis k'meshehi, so that the individual level as is, vetnis achemid, the zweite madrege k'meshehi, should be united with the second level as is, which means fully that elyon ver is an elyon, mit tachten ver is a tachten. The upper as he remains above, and the lower as he tachten, to bring them together in a way that should be a true union is those dur them gilu von inyan ha'emes. That is through the revealing the measure of emes. Was midas ha'emes is mavriach min hakotza lakotza. The truth goes through one extreme to the other extreme. Emes is always there. If you employ emes in that connection, then you can have the upper and the lower connection mamash united, and that's the true level of connection. And that's because Torah is emes, and that's why the Zohar says lo in beiraisa, as the Rebbe will continue to explain further on in this Sikha.